Welcome to Warhammer 40k, a universe so hopelessly grim that dying on your feet in battle might be the best thing that ever happens to you. Forget peaceful endings, noble sacrifices, or glorious deaths. In this universe, existence itself is suffering, and survival often means being trapped in a waking nightmare. Today we're kicking off with a new series by diving into some of the absolute worst fates in the galaxy. Bear in mind these are in no particular order, and this is a series I'd love to continue over the next few months in tandem with our usual Warhammer 40k content. Each fate is drenched in the madness and misery that makes death in the 41st millennium seem like a blessed relief. So if you want to see more of this, more Warhammer 40k content in general, or just want to support the channel, please like the video, leave a comment and subscribe so we can push it to the algorithm gods. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, along with many ways to die. You can be vaporized by a Volkite beam, slowly tortured by the Drukhari, or disappear into the warp with your soul being spoon-fed to a demon. But there is a death that is arguably worse than any of these. It is not personal, it isn't cruel, nor is it even hateful. It is death as a biological inevitability, efficient, relentless, and depressingly impersonal. To be eaten alive by the Tyranids is to be erased, not only from existence, but from memory, legacy, and meaning itself. To understand why this death is so uniquely horrifying, we need to first understand the nature of the Tyranids, a Xenos species that functions less like an invading army and more like a galactic digestive system. Tyranids do not kill for conquest, they do not take prisoners, they do not negotiate. They arrive, they consume, and they depart, leaving behind nothing but a stripped husk of planetary debris and a few very traumatized survivors if they're lucky, or unlucky depending on perspective. A Tyranid hive fleet is essentially a mobile ecosystem. It is composed of countless billions of living organisms, each genetically engineered by the hive mind for a single purpose: consumption. They do not build weapons, they are weapons. From the smallest Ripper swarm to the towering bio-titans like the Hierophant, every Tyranid is designed to hunt, kill, and absorb biomass with grotesque efficiency. When a hive fleet sets its sights on a planet, it doesn't announce its arrival with trumpet blasts or grand proclamations. No, it begins with a psychic scream, a shadow in the warp that chokes the connection between Psykers and the Immaterium. It silences astropathic communication. The planet is cut off, alone, and then the sky darkens. Spores rain from orbit, thousands of them. They're not bombs in the traditional sense, though the impact may as well be one. These are mycetic spores, and they contain the first wave of death. Gaunts, warriors, lictors, all deployed like ammunition from a biological gun. What follows is not a battle, it's an extraction process, like oil from the earth or marrow from bone. To be caught on a planet in the path of a Tyranid hive fleet is to know the true meaning of helplessness. Entire regiments of Astra Militarum, lines of fortified defense, orbital guns and automated turrets, none of it matters. The Tyranids aren't coming to fight, they're coming to feed. And you, dear guardsmen, are not the hero of the story, you are the protein. It starts with the frontline organisms, Hormagaunts and Termagants, thrown into the meat grinder to exhaust defenders. They die in droves and it doesn't matter. Every body dropped by the swarm is reabsorbed, recycled and used to generate more. It's circular warfare, like composting, but with more screaming. If you're caught in that front line, death may come quickly. A claw to the throat, a spike through the gut, messy but over. But if you're wounded and left behind, then comes the real nightmare. Enter the Rippers. These are not soldiers, they're not even combatants in the traditional sense. They are living vacuums, organic piranhas in ambulatory stomachs with teeth. When the swarm moves forward, Rippers move in. They consume the dead, the wounded, the landscape, the buildings, everything. If it has a nutritional value, it's fair game. And unfortunately, human beings, especially warm, screaming ones, are apparently quite the delicacy. Being devoured by a Ripper swarm is not a quick death. They burrow into flesh, they chew muscle, they crack bone. Victims are often still alive as their limbs are gnawed off, their organs torn out and their eyes consumed. And to add insult to horrifying injury, the Rippers are only the beginning. After the initial waves of broken resistance, the Hive begins to deploy capillary towers. These are towering organic siphons that burrow into the crust and begin the extraction of biomatter. Simultaneously, digestion pools bubble to the surface. Great acidic lakes where corpses and living prisoners alike are tossed in, left to dissolve into nutritional goo. These pools are the Tyranid version of a stomach acid bath, and if you're still alive when you're dropped in, well, you won't be for long, but you will be conscious just long enough to wish you weren't. The process is excruciating. Flesh is burned away, limbs dissolve. The pain is total and absolute, and there is no one left to save you. Your planet is already considered lost. Reinforcements, exterminators, they're not coming. You are screaming on a dying world, and you are just one voice among billions being processed for fuel. Perhaps the most dehumanizing aspect of being eaten by Tyranids is not the pain, it's not even the obliteration of your body, it's the erasure of identity. Because once you've been consumed, the hive mind remembers you, not as a person, but as a useful strand of DNA. You see, Tyranids learn, they adapt, they incorporate the genetic material of their prey into new generations. That thing that just killed your squad may have evolved faster reaction time because of a soldier just like you. It may have better armor thanks to some unlucky Astartes who fought bravely but bled all the same. You are not a martyr, you are a template. Once the biomass has been stripped, the ocean slurped up, the mountains dissolved and the atmosphere drained, the Hive Fleet simply moves on. The planet is dead, truly, completely dead. Not even bacteria remain. It is a sphere of rock with no past, no future, and no story. And you were part of that meal and are now part of the Hive. Not remembered, not revered, just gone. To be eaten alive by Tyranids is to die in a way that strips you of dignity, memory, and meaning. It is not evil. It is not hate. It is pure, amoral biology. It is death as a process. You were not just killed, you were repurposed. And that is what makes it a horrible fate in the 41st millennium. Not because it is cruel, but because it doesn't care. Because your death matters less than the leaf on a branch being crushed by a migrating swarm. There are no last words, no heroic stand, just screaming and then silence. In the galaxy of Warhammer 40k, death is not the worst possible outcome. No, that would be too easy. In a universe where planets are glassed on a bureaucrat's whim, where demons feast on souls, and where technology is worshipped rather than understood, death is a mercy. Quick, clean, often anonymous. There are fates worse than death. Becoming a servitor is one of them. To be a servitor is to exist without identity, without purpose of your own. It is to be reduced to a component, a part of the grand machine of the Imperium. You are no longer a person, you are a tool, a biological gear in the galaxy's most bloated, rusted, and absurdly sanctimonious engine. And unlike death, you're still awake, at least for a while. In the most clinical terms, a servitor is a human being who's been cybernetically enhanced, lobotomized, and reprogrammed for menial labor. Servitors come in many forms: mechanical limbs, bionic eyes, steel-plated torsos, hydraulic legs. But the key feature is this: they are no longer sentient. At least, they're not supposed to be. They sweep floors, man plasma reactors, reload ammunition, clean reactor waste, service organic data storage units, or get fused into tank hulls as living components, and many are little more than screaming hard drives. Short answer to who becomes a servitor is anyone the Imperium doesn't want to shoot outright but also doesn't trust to walk away. The long answer: criminals, heretics, dissidents, failed psychers, disgraced nobles, battlefield casualties too injured to be useful but too alive to be buried, even administratum clerks who ask too many questions. You don't have to be evil, you just have to be inconvenient. You see, the Imperium recycles. It has to. Millions die every day. Resources are finite. So what do you do with a soldier who's lost his legs, his will to fight, and possibly a few toes to frostbite? Why, you plug him into a gun turret and call it a promotion. The process of becoming a servitor is, like much of Imperial procedure, unnecessarily arcane and deeply horrifying. Step 1 is capture. Often this comes in the form of sentencing. Courtroom or battlefield makes no difference. The accused is stripped, tagged and handed over to the Adeptus Mechanicus, who take it from there. Step 2 involves lobotomy. The biological brain is not removed entirely, it's still useful, but key sections are surgically excised to eliminate personality, memory, identity, and, crucially, the capacity to resist or question. The goal is to maintain just enough cognition to obey instructions and respond to stimuli, but not enough to think independently. Step 3 involves augmentation. The body is reshaped, fused with machinery. Tubes, pistons, cogitators, and even servo arms are implanted. Joints are replaced with actuators. Pain centers are suppressed or repurposed. Limbs may be removed to make room for vacuum nozzles or plasma cutters, because why waste a hand when you can have a built-in mop? The 4th step involves programming. The Servitor is uploaded with basic instruction sets. Move forward, clean surface, turn valve, scream silently. Some are voice-controlled, others are hard-coded for specific tasks. If you've ever had to reboot a printer, you'll understand how little faith anyone has in this step. And just like that, you're a citizen no more. You are now property. The galaxy is brimming with variations on this theme of mechanized human suffering. We have combat servitors, heavily armed and armored. These are often former soldiers or failed space marine aspirants. They carry heavy weapons and obey commands with terrifying precision, unless they glitch and try to clean the enemy with a flamethrower. There's also gun servitors, fused into tanks, turrets, or walls. They are the weapon, locked in position, eyes replaced by rangefinders, arms replaced with cannons. Most haven't blinked in decades, not that they can. Another common type of servitor is the servo skulls, a specific variant made from the skull of a deceased human, or sometimes a not yet deceased one, mounted with cameras, sensors, and thrusters. These little horrors follow around inquisitors or tech priests, muttering liturgies and recording footage like flying haunted GoPros. We also have menial servitors. These handle maintenance, sanitation, logistics, jobs so thankless that only a brain-dead husk could survive them. They often have to perform repetitive tasks for centuries, sometimes in radioactive environments where a normal worker would dissolve in hours. While servitors are technically not sentient, stories abound, particularly among the more philosophically inclined members of the Mechanicus, of residual memory fragments trapped within the meat beneath the metal. A servitor may groan in its sleep cycle. A floor-scrubbing unit may hum a half-remembered lullaby. A gun servitor may twitch after a battle, mumbling names no one recognizes. These fragments are not enough to count as consciousness, but they're enough to haunt the adepts who service them. And sometimes they remember, if only for a moment. Imagine blinking just once, realizing you're strapped to a wall, metal in your skull, unable to move or scream. And then the realization is gone again, buried under code. If that isn't a fate worse than death, I don't know what is. In the Imperium, individual identity is expendable. What matters is function, compliance, and duty. If you are a liability as a person, perhaps you'll be more useful as a toaster. Servitors are not seen as victims, but as resources, a necessary part of the machinery of mankind's survival. The ecclesiarchy justifies it as divine will. The Adeptus Mechanica sees it as the perfect union of flesh and machine. The Inquisition sees it as a risk management, and everyone else sees it as a warning. You don't complain about your job in the Imperium. You're one bad day away from becoming a janitorial drone with a vacuum arm and a melted frontal lobe. To become a servitor is to be denied even the dignity of death. You're stripped of name, history, and thought. You are a slave to code, lobotomized into silence, walking corridors with wires in your veins and no memory of what freedom ever felt like. And the most horrific part, you still function. Not for days, not even for years, but for centuries. So the next time you question a tech priest's authority, remember, they don't send you to prison. They send you to clean air ducts until the heat death of the universe. In the Imperium of Man, power is often something that is feared more than it is revered, and nowhere is this truer than in the case of the Psyker. To be born with psychic ability in the 41st millennium is not a blessing, it is a curse, a death sentence. A soul-chilling lottery win where the grand prize is a one-way ticket aboard the black ships, those infamous and dreaded vessels of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. To understand the fate of these unfortunate individuals, one must first understand the context into which they are born. The warp, also known as the Immaterium, is a swirling realm of nightmares, made of raw emotion, unfiltered thought, and demonic entities that would like nothing more than to violate the very laws of reality and wear your soul like a screaming coat. Psykers are the unwitting conduits of this madness. They are the cracks in the dam, the human antennas for the Warp's Infinite Horror podcast. Every year, untold millions of Psykers are born across the over 1 million worlds of the Imperium. Most are discovered early, sometimes when they accidentally set their family on fire, or when the voices in their head start screaming at the walls. Local authorities, assuming they aren't a pile of ash or a demon host by that point, report the anomaly. The Psyker is detained, shackled, sometimes drugged into a drooling stupor and shipped off to await the arrival of the Black Ships. The Black Ships themselves are infamous, ominous, black-clad vessels devoid of external markings. They arrive without fanfare and without explanation. When they appear in a system, there is only one thing to be done: compliance. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica does not negotiate, they do not explain, they collect. And what they collect are Psykers by the thousands. They are herded like livestock, shoved into cramped, dark, echoing holes where the wailing of terrified souls blends into the distant, incomprehensible humming of arcane machinery. The environment is deliberately oppressive. It has to be. One uncontrolled psychic outburst could tear a hole in the hull, summon a demon, or cause a catastrophic warp breach. The Black Ships are not just vessels, they are mobile containment facilities for the dangerously gifted. Inside, the Psykers begin their journey into something much worse than death: spiritual degradation, madness, and either weaponization or sacrifice. Most will never reach Terra. A significant number will die en route, either because their minds collapse under the pressure, or because they were never stable enough to begin with. Others, deemed too dangerous or too weak, are cleansed, a polite euphemism for being spaced, burnt, or psychically lobotomized. If you're lucky, and I use the term with cosmic irony, you make it to Holy Terra. But what awaits you there is not salvation. At the heart of the Golden Throne, the rotting carcass of the Emperor of mankind's failing life support systems, lies a constant need: souls. Thousands of Psykers are sacrificed daily to keep the Emperor alive in his pseudo-death. Their souls are flensed, burned as spiritual fuel to power the Astronomicon, the beacon that guides all of humanity's warp travel. This is not metaphor, this is literal. They are fed into the machine. Their agony echoes across reality. For those not chosen to be soul fuel, the options are no more comforting. Some are turned into sanctioned Psykers, a term that sounds far more comforting than it is. These are individuals whose psychic powers have been harnessed, trained, and ruthlessly controlled. They are employed by the Imperial Guard as battlefield support, or more terrifyingly, by the Inquisition. You might be assigned to a regiment and taught to explode the minds of heretics from a distance. You might also detonate your own skull by accident or be executed mid-battle if your control falters. It's a coin toss. Then there are those who become astropaths, who undergo the soul-binding ritual with the Emperor himself. That might sound divine, but it's more like psychic chemotherapy. Effective, but utterly traumatic. The soul binding shatters the individual, leaving many blind, physically damaged, or mentally unrecognizable. They lose their sense of self. Many are driven mad, but those who survive gain the ability to send messages through the warp, becoming the Imperium's essential lifeline across the stars, at the cost of everything. And here's the most tragic part: this is the good outcome. This is what happens if everything goes according to plan. The average Psyker's fate is to be swept away into darkness, interrogated, judged, and usually sacrificed in one way or another. They are not thanked, they are not remembered, they are certainly not mourned. They are resources, dangerous, unstable, and expendable. In many ways, the tragedy of the Psyker is emblematic of the Imperium itself. Brutal, utilitarian, hopeless. You are born with the gift of second sight, the Emperor demands your soul. You can hear the warp whispering, "Congratulations, you're now a biological battery or a living weapon." Free will, not applicable. The Imperium doesn't need you to thrive, it needs you to burn. And so the Black Ships sail on, silent, relentless, the galaxy's great psychic vacuum cleaners. To the average citizen, their arrival is an ominous sign. To a Psyker, it is the end of their life as a human being. Immortality is often presented as a gift, a chance to endure beyond the bounds of mortal fragility. To some, it's a reward for service or sacrifice, a chance to live forever in honor. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where even the concept of alive is negotiable, immortality comes wrapped in iron, fed through wires and buried in stasis until the war machine demands your resurrection. Welcome to the Dreadnought, the tomb that walks, a cybernetic sarcophagus for the barely living, barely sane remains of a once great space marine. You do not pilot a Dreadnought, you are the Dreadnought. And if you're lucky, you'll only be woken up to kill and not to remember. Because what lies at the core of a Dreadnought is not just war, but existence without rest. A fate not merely worse than death, but worse than continuity. To become a Dreadnought, you must first earn it. Not in the employee of the month sense, but in the you got your legs vaporized holding a hill against a warlord titan and somehow lived sense. Dreadnoughts are reserved for the most venerated of the Adeptus Astartes. Heroes, champions, ancient warriors who have sustained wounds too catastrophic even for the Emperor's gene-forged miracles to repair. The body is shattered, the flesh beyond salvage, but the mind, yes, the mind is still intact. Mostly. Or at least it can still follow orders. So what do? They entomb you inside a stasis casket lined with nutrient pumps, neuron stimulators, and pain inhibitors. You're then plugged directly into the chassis of a walking tank. Metal becomes your flesh. Servo arms become your limbs. Your voice, when permitted, is broadcast through vox grills like a thunderstorm being screamed through a cathedral. You become a Dreadnought. Congratulations. Now back to sleep. Dreadnoughts are not active warriors, they're vaulted relics. When not needed in battle, they're sealed in the dark, literally. Placed in stasis chambers deep within the chapter's catacombs, forgotten until the next planetary invasion, heretical uprising, or enemy assault requires your quote-unquote honored wisdom and might. Or more accurately, your massive autocannons and the ability to rip a tank in half. You don't wake naturally, you're revived, painfully, slowly, like dragging your consciousness out of a century-long coma only to be told there's no coffee, no breakfast, and you're late for the apocalypse. When you are active, you're often confused. Temporal drift, memory fragmentation, possible residual PTSD from the time you were disemboweled by a demon prince on Arcus Prime. It's all part of the package. It's not uncommon for a Dreadnought to think it's fighting a war that ended 700 years ago. But don't worry, your tech marines will slap a few purity seals on your sarcophagus and call it battle fervor. Here lies the true horror. You never die. You never sleep properly. You never heal. Your body is a ruin kept technically alive by a machine that doesn't care if you're comfortable, only functional. Your brain is the only thing left of you, sloshing in a nutrient soup, watching centuries pass between brief moments of slaughter. You are woken to fight, then silenced again. A weapon, a relic, a memory. And your brothers, they age, they fall, they die. Successes come, the world changes, you do not. You are the living past, shackled to the present. Some Dreadnoughts are 3, 4, even 5,000 years old. They've watched entire chapters rise and fall. They've fought in wars no one remembers. They've outlived their comrades, their home worlds, even their enemies. And still they fight. Why? Because you cannot retire from duty in the Imperium. You can only be shelved. Over time, most Dreadnoughts change. Some become stoic, contemplative figures, offering wisdom between barrages of missiles and lamenting the decay of honor in newer generations. Others become bitter, fragmented, angry voices trapped in a coffin that no longer feels real. They scream in binary, argue with tech marines, and rage at the stasis chambers for the crime of being silent. Bjorn the Fell-Handed, one of the oldest living Dreadnoughts, once walked beside the Primarch Lehman Russ before he vanished at M31. Today he speaks in riddles and dreams. He's venerated, feared, worshipped, and probably doesn't remember what grass smells like. Others fare less well. Dreadnoughts driven mad are quietly decommissioned. Some are turned into living monuments, plugged into shrines as mute guardians. Some simply vanish beneath the fortress monastery in the restricted vaults, where tech marines pray that the screams don't echo too loudly. Immortality, it turns out, isn't a gift, it's a sentence. And yet the chapters revere their Dreadnoughts. They are paraded like saints, consulted like ancient oracles. Honored brother Dreadnought, what wisdom do you have from the age of apostasy? And the Dreadnought internally is probably thinking, please just let me sleep. It is simultaneously tragic and hilarious that the Imperium treats these poor souls with such veneration while completely ignoring the torment they endure. Their advice is sought, their presence is hailed, but no one ever asks if they're okay. Because of course they aren't. They're a skull, floating in soup, wired into a death tank. But sure, Brother Veneratus, tell us again how to cleanse mutants with divine rage. Please ignore the screaming in the walls. It goes without saying, but eventually all dreadnoughts fall. They take one shot too many, a lucky railgun round, a melter blast to the core, and they die. Not dramatically, not nobly, but simply, finally. There is no release ceremony, no funeral. The wreckage is salvaged, the sarcophagus removed, if it's still intact, and either installed in a new frame or entombed in a crypt, where it might still wake again if needed. Even in death, the Imperium cannot let go, and if you're not quite dead, well, back to the vault. To be interred in a dreadnought is to become a paradox. You are immortal, but not living. Honored, but forgotten. Awake, but mostly dreaming. A god of war whose every breath is pain. You are a relic of the past, a myth in metal, a warning about the cost of service in a universe that rewards sacrifice with further obligation. In Warhammer 40k, death is a mercy, but the Dreadnought is what happens when mercy is denied. So the next time you see a towering engine of destruction stomp across the battlefield, just remember, inside that box of guns is someone who really, really wanted to die about 800 years ago, and the Imperium said no. The Warp, the Immaterium, the Sea of Souls. It goes by many names, but none of them do justice to what it actually is. A dimension of madness, a realm of nightmares given form, a swirling ocean of emotion and raw psychic energy that underpins the very fabric of reality. And if you're unfortunate enough to be trapped in it, well, death isn't something you fear anymore, it's something you pray for. Let us begin with the basic premise. In Warhammer 40k, faster-than-light travel is not achieved through science or technological marvels, but through sorcery with a spreadsheet. Ships don't warp space, they enter the warp, a hellish alternate dimension where thoughts and emotions take on physical form. You don't so much travel through space as throw your ship into a blender full of gods and demons, hoping to come out the other side intact. The key here is navigation. Ships rely on the Astronomicon, a psychic lighthouse projected from the golden throne of holy terror, maintained by the souls of thousands of sacrificed Psykers. Navigators, mutated humans with a literal third eye, stare into the warp, lock onto the beacon, and guide the vessel through the madness, which is great until the light goes out, or the beacon flickers, or the navigator loses their mind halfway through and decides that yes, the howling voices are totally trustworthy travel guides. Now picture this, you're on a warp-capable vessel, perhaps a military cruiser or a merchant transport hauling overpriced amasec and 3 metric tons of glow sticks. You make the jump, everything goes numb. The Geller field hums to life, a fragile energy barrier that keeps the screaming demons outside the ship from popping in for tea and spinal cords. And then something goes wrong. Maybe the beacon flickers, maybe the Geller field weakens, maybe your navigator sneezes. Regardless, you're now lost, directionless, isolated, and trapped in a realm where reality is a suggestion, and your worst fears are trying to physically manifest in the hallway outside your bunk. Time doesn't really work in the warp. You could spend 3 hours there and emerge 3 years later, or enter for 2 days and come out 5 minutes before you left. Or, and this is the real kicker, you never come out at all, you just drift, forever. The ship becomes your coffin, your crewmates, your companions in shared despair. The walls start bleeding, the air smells like burnt dreams, and the sound of something breathing in the walls never goes away. But what does it actually mean to be trapped in the warp? This isn't just a navigational error, it's existential damnation. You're no longer in real space, you are quite literally outside of time. The crew stops aging, until they start aging rapidly. Some hear voices, others begin to hallucinate, food mutates, water turns into molten regret. People forget how to speak or remember too much. 1 minute the captain is giving orders, the next he's trying to eat the astropath because the warp convinced him she's made of gold. And then come the entities. Demons don't knock, they don't ask permission. All it takes is a momentary lapse in the Geller field, a crack in the shield, and the ship becomes a hunting ground. The lucky ones are killed quickly. The unlucky ones are possessed. turn into flesh puppets that speak in reverse syllables and bleed laughter. Some ships become ghost vessels, endlessly drifting, filled with corpses that dance to music no one else can hear. Others become warp-touched, ships that are alive. The walls pulse, doors become mouths. The engine begins whispering in forgotten tongues, and the crew, they just accept it, because at a certain point, the horrifying becomes mundane. Ah yes, the gravity reversed again. Jenkins is stuck to the ceiling. Must be Thursday. Now this might sound exaggerated, but it isn't. The lore is filled with documented cases of vessels vanishing into the warp, only to return centuries later. The crew still alive, still screaming, eyes white, skin grey, clutching rosaries and muttering about the reflections that weren't ours. Or worse, they don't return at all, but the ship does, empty, or full of other things. And the Imperium's response, a healthy mix of superstition and bureaucracy. The ship is either burned, boarded by a kill team, or quietly repurposed after an exorcism with some new paint. Never mind the psychological trauma, never mind the captain who now believes he's the ship. What matters is that the cargo arrived and the paperwork was filed. Even the elite aren't immune. Astartes, Inquisitors, rogue traders, they've all tasted the warp's insanity. The difference is that they know better than to trust it. They arm themselves with holy seals, psychic wards and blind faith, and still they sometimes vanish without a trace, or return, different. The Inquisition keeps records of such things, black vaults filled with incident logs, subject believed to have existed for 60,000 subjective years in warp drift, returned with the knowledge of impossible geometry and a complete set of teeth growing internally, executed on sight. So yes, being trapped in the warp is a fate worse than death, not because you die, but because you don't. You exist too long, in a place that was never meant to hold you. You remember things that never happened. You see past and the future leaking into each other. You start hearing yourself think, and you don't like what you're saying. And if by some miracle your ship does return to real space, you will never be the same. The Imperium doesn't rehabilitate. It classifies. It purges. Survivors of warp entrapment are often mind-wiped, exiled, or simply executed as a precaution. You might come back, but who you were never will. In a galaxy defined by cruelty, faith, and fire, the warp remains the most unknowable terror of all. And while the rest of the Imperium may look on with fear or awe, those who've been trapped inside know the truth. Hell isn't beneath us, it's between the stars.